All right. Does everyone see? Oh, we're on the wrong slide. Sorry about this. Oh my gosh. Stop share. I told you, delete and misleading, putting a lot in my hands. Okay, let me try it from the beginning. There we go. Stop this share. Stop. All right. Are you seeing it again or no?
I am not
Okay.
seeing.
I'm not either.
Okay. Probably because I messed something up. Screen two. There we go.
I hear you.
All right. How does that look?
Looks great.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, we got that one.
All right.
Awesome.
And I'm just going to make sure I can. Yes, I probably can do it with my keypad too. All right, I think it is the top of the hour. Very excited. Every time we get to meet with all of you who come into this virtual space where we can learn more about our Native American relatives. And it is just such an honor for today's speaker. And we're going to go through just a couple of slides before we turn this over to Miss Delita. But I would like to welcome each of you and thank you for being involved in our cultural training and just kind of remind you that we are funded by PCORI, and we have funding through an engagement award. We have to always acknowledge a disclaimer. But while I'm kind of reading through this for you, there is a QR code on the screen, and we thought it would be really cool to be able to capture what we're grateful for, because this is kind of the time of the year when we think about, family, friends, situations, things that we're blessed with in our lives. So if you'll just scan that QR code, it's a Mentimeter, and it'll allow you to actually enter, I think, three things that you are thankful for. And so while you're doing that, and the Mentimeter is kind of percolating. Somebody much smarter than me is going to share their screen and share the results, or else drop it into the chat. But just going back to PCORI, the views, statements, and opinions presented in this cultural training series are solely the responsibility of the authors and do not necessarily represent the views of PCORI, which is Patient Centered Outcomes Research Institute, its board of governors, or its methodology committee. I'm going to turn this over to the next slide to Catherine, who is one part of our Hope leadership team, and she's going to tell you just a little bit more about some things that we need in terms of support. Oh, here comes our Mentimeter. Yay.
Thank you, Cynthia. And this is a
Mm.
really cool addition to today's meeting. I love seeing what everyone's popping into this Mentimeter. Pets, nature, family seems to be a big one. Health and friends, our social fabric is really what supports us. And I think especially around this time of year, we're all practicing gratitude and um, just reflecting on the year we've had as we go into the end of the year and the next to come. So, really excited to see all of this. And I can't wait to learn this form of technology and integrate it into my team's presentations as well. So, thank you all for participating, and thank you, Laura, for sharing this on the screen. So cool. I am going to talk to you guys today briefly before we get started about the an ask that we have about our pre and post surveys. As you know, we've been launching polls at the beginning and the end of our monthly sessions, and this really helps us to understand how we as a group are progressing with our level of understanding, our confidence on important topics regarding lived experience, historical trauma, the history of Native Americans throughout Michigan, throughout our country. So we really appreciate everyone's involvement in completing those surveys. I did want to note that as we conclude our session today, I may launch the survey a little bit earlier. Delita, our guest speaker today, her and I were talking about it, and it's not intended to distract you from what she may be sharing at that time, but rather just to ensure that we're collecting your feedback and your input so that we can continue to do the good work that this series is intended to do. So I don't know, Cynthia, if you would be able to reshare your screen. Just want to provide everybody of that visual ask to complete the pre and post session, but also to plug what we have coming up in November, or I'm sorry, it is November. Wow. But to plug what we have coming up in December for our last session of the year, hoping to plant a little seed today to get your thoughts moving and your ideas flowing in anticipation of that December cultural training session. We will be hosting a little bit more of an interactive and engaging discussion at that session. We'll have a shareable vision board that we will ask for you to contribute to with your reflections on this cultural training series. We're going to crack open the space to discuss learning needs and resources on the topics that we've discussed over the last 11 months so far. And we really hope for this to be an engaging brainstorming session and learning opportunity to talk a little bit more about the PCORI framework and equip you with tools to take back into your own spaces to continue learning, sharing, advocating, and improving on all of this. So anything that the other Hope cultural training and leadership team would like to add to that? I'll pause here if I missed anything.
I think you covered it well. Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome. And I guess now, before I turn it over to Laura to introduce our speaker today, you can see on the screen CME information that's available for our speaker today, as well as the text number to the 800 number. And I believe that will be dropped in the chat here shortly. So if you are claiming CME, you can text 65984 to 844-420-1171. And again, we'll drop that in the chat for you to claim that CME. So thanks so much, and I'll turn it over to Laura.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is my honor to be able to introduce Delita Gasco Smith. She is a member of the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians, and I know her introduction means more coming from her. So I'm going to just pass it over to her and say miigwech for today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Awesome, miigwech. Ani, abuju, waganaxing o dawan daw. The ching ebing nindojaba. Wakwano singing doda badaguas. Jasku doda, Mishiki Kwa Indigenous, Minma Stony Point First Nations, occupation at Camp Iberwash, Jumoganish. And so what I just did in our language, our introductions, and as Anishinaabe people, we always start with that place, our homelands here. So when I said Waganaxing Odawa Dao, that means that I'm a woman from this Waganaxing Odawa nation here. Taching being Nindojaba, that's that village, this place where our people first gathered, where our spirits first sounded here. And what that means for us is it's that place along the water. Wikwadnosing, that's that place where I live today. That's how we say Harbor Springs in our language. I come from Harbor Springs. I live on the reservation just north of Harbor Springs. Jashku that's that clan. That's my family that I belong to. In our language at Jashku, that means muskrat. And I know muskrat, the little mud rat, just likes to play around all day long. But that muskrat plays a very, very significant role in our story of creation here. And then Mishiki Kwa, that's who I am. In our language, Mishiki, that's that turtle. That's a turtle woman. So that's how I know they know me in that spirit world, is that it's that turtle woman. And I was given that name. I was actually sent back here with that name when I finished fasting. I'd done 4 fastings, 3 4-day fastings and a 10-day fasting to gather those teachings and hear our stories and my instructions on how to carry those things out here. And part of that is actually storytelling and sharing our stories with everybody. So, but with that being said, I just want to say that, my teachings are just those things that I hold dear to my heart, things that I've learned here along the way, and being immersed in our culture. And just because some of these teachings might be a little bit different than what mine are, that doesn't mean that one of us is right and the other one is wrong. It just means that we had different teachings from different teachers. But, I'm a woman of this Wagonoxing Odawa Nation here, and so I've never gone anyplace else looking for teachings. When the Creator put us, the Anishinaabe people here, He gave us everything we need. So, the only way I know is through prayer and fasting. So when I need answers and when I'm looking for something, that's what I do. I go out and I call it out in the bush, set up a small lodge and I fast and I pray for what I'm looking for. So those are my teachings that I get from here. Everything I get came right from our area here. So another thing I'd like to say is that Zoom is great and it's great for getting information and things out there, but I encourage you to please ask questions. Nothing is off limits. I'm not going to be offended by anything you ask or anything you say, make comments or whatever. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I've been doing this for a long time and I can handle it. I'm a big girl, right? And also reach out if you have any questions or any comments or anything after we're done today, please. My information is on there. I encourage you to reach out. So with that being said, let's just get to it, huh? Can we have, first slide. Right, there we go. This gentleman right here, the gentleman that you see, he was the principal headman of our community until his passing about 4 years ago. And we, his successor has not been named yet. We got a pretty good idea who it's going to be, but this gentleman's name was Nimishomas Bidasagah. The European translation of his last name, Bidasagah, is actually Petoskey. His third great grandpa was actually the gentleman at the city of Petoskey was named after. So his family roots go really deep in this community here. A very loved and respected man. I miss him so much. I mean, but I'm very fortunate because I could also call him Mishomis Newsba. That he was my dad. And a lot of my teachings came from him, and he's the one that let me know it's okay to be who I am. Don't be afraid to stand up and say, the silence stops with me. We need to talk about this if we're going to help our people. But something he always said, Snuga, Anishinaabe Bemadaziwen. Life is hard here for Indian people, but it doesn't matter how hard it is. We always have the choice. Emanade, which is the good things, or Enjashing. Those are those negative ways that we want to stay away from. He used to say, just that good path is the only way you can go. You can only go forward no matter how hard it is. And so we're so grateful for him and his teachings. But that word in our language, that Bidasagah, like I said, the European translation of that is Petoskey. And what that means in our language is it's that first light that you see, whether it's that sunshine, that sunrise in the morning, after a storm, which we had our first snowstorm here, when those clouds part and that light that shines down and that first light that you see, that's who this gentleman was. And he really was a light in our community, and we all miss him a whole bunch. But so anyway, next slide. You want to, all right. So when we talk about historical trauma, I've always called it, and I always will because I lived it. And a lot of people are offended by that term now. So I guess the politically correct term they use for it now is collective trauma. Yes, something happened to the people here, but nobody really knows for sure what it was. Something did happen. So they call it that collective trauma. I just call it what it is. It's that historical trauma. It's part of our history here, and those are the effects that's the effects of traumas inflicted on groups of people because of their race. In our case here, it was Anishinaabe people, their race, their creed, and authenticity, but it lingers in the souls of our descendants. When we talk about that intergenerational trauma, this is what we're referring to, right? And as a result of that, many people in our communities here experience higher rates of mental, physical illness, substance abuse, erosion of family and community structures, and the persistent cycle of trauma that destroys our families and communities and threatens our entire culture. So, that's the textbook, just plain and simple. Our people, even sometimes today, we still have 2, 3, or even 4 generations of the same family living in the same household. And so all those things that I still call it the historical trauma, and those things that happen to our people, right up through to today, is passed down from generation to generation because of that blood memory we have. So a lot of people don't understand what it is. They don't know that name. I said once we openly talk about it, they understand. But for so long we haven't, and we haven't put a name to it. But when I have people come in here looking to start their cultural teachings, and I explain these things to them, it's just like, I get it. I get exactly what you're saying. I says, and it makes sense. Or, they'll come in and I never thought about it that way, but that's what it is. This is what I'm feeling, and this is where I'm at in my life. So, yeah, next slide, please, honey. Wow. Okay. So one of the big things that I do here when my main, I don't like to call it a job, it's a privilege for me to be able to do the things that I do, but I help people reconnect with the strength, the beauty of our culture, and helping people process the grief of the past traumas, whether it was to them personally or family members that uh, have lived that, So we're trying to create new historical narrative, so we can have that healing effect for those experiencing that historical trauma. Textbook definition, effects of historical trauma. This is definitely not an all-inclusive list, but the effects of historical trauma can be manifested in many ways among Native American people. It has included, but is not limited to the following things: a breakdown of our traditional Native family values, alcohol and other substance use, that's a big one. Depression, anxiety, suicidal tendencies. I've had, personal involvement with that. I had a younger brother, and that was his answer to everything. 3 times he tried to commit suicide because he couldn't live with the memories that he had from when he was in the boarding school in Harbor Springs. So the residential school there, child abuse and neglect and domestic violence are rampant, and not just our community, but a lot of them. And there's a lot of communities that suffer the same traumas that we do, but they just come from different sources. Post-traumatic stress, general loss and meaning of a sense of hope, internalized depression, self-hatred. That was what drove my brother to try and commit suicide 3 different times. And the last time he did, he was living with me at the time, and so I found him. I was the one that found him and had to take care of him. But yeah, if we could have the next slide, please. This is kind of a timeline, so it helps you understand just a little bit how our first European contact, how it's affected us and brought us up to where we are today. But we know that our first contact with non-Indigenous people from here, that was in 1492. That was 530 years ago, 32 years actually. I got to update the slide, but a long time ago, right? And then 245 years after our first contact, 1776, the European ancestors that came here, they declared that independence because they wanted their religious freedoms. They wanted to be open to practice what they believed without being scrutinized for it, or even in some place punished for it, right? So that was like 245 years after contact. In 1863, that was when President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. That was like 160 years ago then, when that happens, to end the oppression over the black people that were brought here, you know, however they got here, most of them were brought here in those earlier years. They were just slaves. That's what they were brought here for, and that's how they were used. But basically, he gave them the basic freedoms, even though it was limited in scope to those black people in that were here. But it had absolutely nothing to do with the indigenous people here because we weren't even considered citizens of this country. The Indian Citizenship Act in 1924, you know, that was only about, what, 98 years ago now. 432 years after our first contact with European people, they're recognizing that the United States, the indigenous people that were here before they came here, they actually recognized us as citizens of the United States of America. We didn't have any rights to do anything before that happened. We couldn't own property, you know, we couldn't openly practice our ceremonies, we couldn't, even just a simple social gathering, we couldn't do those things. We weren't allowed to speak our language was stripped from us. And they just completely found every way that they could to try and destroy our communities. And one of the biggest ways they did that was with the boarding schools. Yeah, as sick as it was. But okay, if we go forward to about 1982, yeah, that was President Carter, who's president at the time. He signed into law the Indian Religious Freedom Act. That was just like about 46 years ago now. I don't know. I gotta go update my dates on here, but it wasn't all that long ago. But I think it was the case was the state of Kansas versus United States of America sought to have that act repealed, and it had to do with one of the medicines. And when I talk about medicines, these are the natural medicines. They're not internal medicines, you know, that we use. One of them was peyote. That's tribes in the Southwest out there. They use that during their ceremonies, and somebody recognized that as a drug, if you will, and the whole justification for repealing the Indian Religious Freedom Act was because of the use of peyote during ceremonies. So it was actually repealed in 1982. So again, it stripped us of our rights to openly practice our ceremonies, to speak our language, to teach our children our ways. We didn't have that right. So forward to up to 1993, and I said, whether you like him or whether you didn't, you know, whether he had sexual relations with that woman or he inhaled or he didn't, President Clinton actually did a service to the indigenous people here. He signed into law the Indian Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and that was only what, 32 years ago now, a little bit less than that. That's not a long time to completely rebuild a culture. But that's why you see more now. You'll see more of the powwows, you'll see the social gatherings, you'll see those kind of things done openly, is because the Indian Religious Freedom Restoration Act that was signed into law. So that's not a lot of years to completely rebuild our culture, but we're making great strides with it. We have an excellent language department here in Little Traverse Bay Bands, and it's so encouraging to see our young people speaking our language again and identify themselves as Anishinaabe people. But before that time, we could not do those things openly without persecution, being jailed. And I'll share a story with you about that because I went to the residential school in Harbor Springs, and a lot of people don't know that the one that we had here was the longest running residential school in the United States. It was in operation for 103 years. This is right in our backyard here, right around the bay, and a lot people don't realize that. They're shocked when I tell them that. But I was in that school from 1959 to 1964, and our language, like I said, our language was completely forbidden. And I remember one day that we were standing, you know, there was four of us up at the front of the classroom, and we were doing spelling. And the nun that we had, Sister Winifred, she says, write does on the board. And so I was so proud of myself. I said, I got this one. I just know this one, you know, because my mom used to buy these big boxes of laundry soap, you know, and it was called Does. It's spelled D-U-Z, you know, it does everything. You can use it for everything. And so that's what I put on the board. I spelled it out, D-U-Z. And Sister Winifred walked behind us a couple times, just looking at things on the board. And she came back to me because I was the first one in line there. And she hit me so hard that I fell to my knees. And remember, I was only like 7 years old then. And I went down to my knees. And the next thing you know, she was grabbing me by the hair and she pulled me up and she smashed my head into the chalkboard there. And she just went back and forth, erasing everything that was on the board and using my head to do that. It's just like I didn't understand. I had absolutely no idea why she was doing it. She wanted does. I spelled does. When I put that on there, D-U-Z, she thought I was writing it in our language. And that's why that punishment was so swift and it was so severe like that. And then when she got done, um, she threw me in a trash can and I had to sit in a trash can all day long. So it's not, that was our reality then. I thought I was doing a good thing because I knew how to spell that, but she thought I was putting it in our language and was strictly forbidden. So that was part of my learning process. Okay, you want to go to the next slide, please. When we talk about that historical unresolved grief, that's historical unresolved grief is a result of historical trauma that has not been sufficiently acknowledged, expressed, or otherwise addressed. So you see those little pair. I remember when I was because when I was in second grade, Sister Fidelis was our music teacher. And Lord knows I'm not a songbird. I'm telling you, I'm not a lead singer at all. I can sing backup and it's usually way in the back, but I Sister Fidelis used to get frustrated with me because I just couldn't I didn't put a lot into it either because I didn't really want to sing their songs, but she just got to the point and she would, rather than frustrate herself anymore, when I would come in for music, she would just grab me by the arm. I needed to go to the kitchen to peel potatoes or get sent up to the boys, the dorms upstairs and clean, scrub the floors, clean the sinks, do whatever need to be done, So that I spent a lot of time doing that. But I remember one time I went up there to clean and I got sent down to the boys' dorm because someone had been sick down there and I had to go clean it up. But when I walked around the corner into those boys' dorms, there was change, and this is actually a pair of shackles that was in that school. But they had several pairs of them, just chains hanging from the ceiling. They had these shackles with them in there, and I never seen them before. But this was also a reality for us, if kids tried to run away, the punishment was also severe, and it was this is one of the ways they had to keeping them when they got them back, and they always did. But when they tore the school down, we actually found this is a pair that was actually in the school. It's in our archives now, but they found those chains and shackles still attached to the plumbing in the basement of the school when they tore it down, and that was in the 1980s. So when we talk about, oh my gosh, it's been so long ago, just get over it, stop. How can you look at something like that and just say, just get over it? That'd be like me asking you to yeah, 9/11 was a terrible thing, but can't we just get over it and quit talking about it or talk about something else or give it a different name? Oh, sorry about that, Angel. I'm sorry about that. Let me turn that thing down. I'm trying to get you. There, leave a message. So anyway, and we talk about that disenfranchised grief. It's a product of historical trauma, collective trauma, if you want to call it that, where loss cannot be voiced publicly or it's not publicly acknowledged. And so many instances, our parents, our grandparents, our aunties, who experienced the same things we did, they knew what was coming for us, and they never talked about it. They wouldn't share that because one, it was too hurtful for them, and two, they knew that those things were happening to us, and there wasn't a doggone thing that they could do about it. If we were native here, we went to the Holy Childhood School. We went to the residential school here. We didn't go to the public schools. That wasn't allowed at all. So when I was in that school, like I said, I was from 1959 to 1964. I was there for 4 years. So, a lot of that internalized suppression, occurs when traumatized people, is in this case, our children, because it was so different from everything they knew when they were growing up that, we internalized the views of the oppressor. In this case, it was the Catholic Church and the Catholic school. but they perpetuate a cycle of self-hatred that manifests itself into negative behaviors. A lot of them, whether it's cutting, whether it's suicidal tendencies, or, just acting out, it was all part of it. So next slide, please. This is just tell you just how little they actually thought of the kids that were in that school. And keep in mind, when that school was at full capacity, they could accommodate 200 of our children at the same time. 200 residential residential students. Those are the students that stayed right there all the time. But there was also for everyday classes for families, which mine was one of them. We lived just 2 blocks from the school, so for the most part, we could just go home at night and didn't have to deal with anything anymore. But kids that they would bring kids from everywhere and to reside at the school, and that's just so they could break down family units more quickly. But anyway, this is an actual letter that was and this is from April 25th of 1952. That was only 2 years before I was born. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Seeley, thank you very much for your donation of $10 for My Little Indians. Yours is the first invitation that was ever extended to one of our papooses to come and spend the vacation somewhere. We have a few little boys and girls who have no one at all interested whether they live or die or come or go. I would send you a little boy of 6 years or older, or a little girl, whichever you would prefer. These Indian children are very little trouble, especially the one that I have in mind. If you really mean it, I will see that we get him ready. You may come and you may have him at any time you wish. I am not making inquiries about you because it takes a good person to make an offer that you did. Please let me know. With kindest regards, Father John. So, 9 times out of 10, when those kids, they didn't come back from their vacations with families. Most of them didn't. We don't know for sure because they never kept records of what families they went to. They were gone. A lot of them from our area right here went through the Catholic Services Orphanage up in Marquette, and they were adopted out there, and their families never heard of them again. My family's a good example of that. I have 2 aunties. One of them had 4 kids, one of them had 5 kids, and I had an uncle that had 2. And they were all taken away from our family and went through this Catholic Services Orphanage up in Marquette, and we never seen them again. As much as I hate social media sometimes, we've been very fortunate because we've been able to find a small handful of them and reconnect with our family. They've been able to reconnect with us. I have one that's in California, one that lives in Washington State. She had absolutely no idea where to look for us at. All she knows is that she was adopted through the orphanage in Marquette, and she never had any way to contact that because the records aren't available to us. But follow up to this letter too, one that said, or if you prefer, we can, for your generous donation of $10, we have some kids that are labeled troubled, and you can have 2 of those for $10. So trouble, I don't have any idea what that meant. I said they were physically, handicapped, if they were, who knows? It could have been anything, they had disabilities of some kind, whether they physical or whether they were mental. It could have been anything, but yeah, the ones that they labeled trouble, or the ones that basically they were the first ones that they wanted to get rid of, they offered 2 of those for $10. So yeah, unfortunately, that's our reality. And that was, like I said, that was 2 years before I was born. Anyway, for $10, you could have one. Yeah, if we'd have next slide, please. Okay. Yeah, that's what I said. And I heard this right in our clinic here, when I first started working here. One of our counselors at the time, it was so long because she was outside of my office, and I was talking to somebody else about historical trauma, and she said, "Oh my God, that was so long ago. Just forget it, get over it, and stop feeling sorry for yourself." So yeah, well, she had a long conversation with me after that comment. But anyway, so what could we do? And then where do we go from here is what we're looking at. So one, don't minimize our spirituality. Now that we have the right to openly practice it, our kids are growing up with that, they're growing with our language, our songs, and it's amazing. But part of my job is to help introduce that spirituality to them, and those medicines. But I talk about those medicines. Those are medicines that we gather that the Creator gave us here to help us keep in balance. We have that mushkadewash, it's wild sage. We have winggush, which is sweetgrass. Gijik, which is a cedar, that's our cleansing medicine. And then we have that asema, tobacco. And those are for offering. We use that for offerings when we're requesting something for someone, when we're looking for teachings. We give those thanks when we're out gathering those medicines. Those medicines are giving themselves up for us. So when I talk about medicines, those are the medicines that I'm talking about. One thing I do with the first time someone comes to see me, what I do is I open up their hand, and I put those medicines, I mix them together and I put them in their hand, empowering them. Tell them this is okay. This is for you. Your blood memory is telling you that this is what you need. That's why you're here. And so many of them think that just because they haven't been raised with the culture and those teachings, that one, they're ashamed that they don't have it, and two, they don't know how to ask for it. Yeah, so I try and get them comfortable with those medicines. And unfortunately, our community is the same as everybody else's. When someone gets that knowledge and they're trying to make a name for themselves, they put them up on a pedestal and make people feel that they're less than because I've got all these teachings and I know all this stuff, and they don't share those teachings. I don't believe in that. I said the only way we're going to heal as a community and as individuals is to pass that knowledge on. So I do that, and that's the first thing. These are your medicines. Use them every day. You have that right. If you don't have that Anishinaabe name, if you don't have that spiritual name, if you don't know what your clan is, I can help you find those. Well, that blood memory is telling you there's something more that you need, and this is where you're going to find it. And I always remind them too that one day at a time, it only takes one person to make a ceremony. As much as I love a social event, our ceremonies, we have our lodges, our healing ceremonies, we have those social gatherings where we all get together and speak our language and do whatever it is we do, all of those things like that. But at the end of the day, we have those pipe carriers, those Naganwe Nini, the ones who lead us, those culture keepers that we have. But at the end of the day, I just encourage people to remember it only takes one person to make a ceremony, and that person can be you. We all have the right to do that. The Creator give us these teachings, those 7 grandmothers, 7 grandfather teachings. We have those 21 original instructions that we have here. And those work for everybody, not just for a few people to hold, but every day, every time you pick those medicines up, you're in ceremony, and that's all you need. So, yeah, you want to go to the next slide, honey? That'd be great. Okay, so for us, I think this is the way I see it. Culture is prevention. So where do we go from here? I know that in AA, they have the 12-step program. For us, it was the 21 original instructions, and then we have that Nijwashwe, Mishomasak, Nijwashwe, Nokomasak. Those are the 7 grandmothers and 7 grandfather teachings that we use every day. Hang on. Yeah. Love, respect, truth, honesty, bravery, those. So, we were in a meeting one here time. We had a gentleman that was working with a nice man. I had a good relationship with him, but we were in a staff meeting one day, and he was non-tribal. And so we were talking about our spirituality, and I started talking about the 7 grandmothers and 7 grandfathers. And he looked at me, he says, "Okay, Dolita, so, he was trying to do up some informational brochures. And he says, "How do I reference those?" He said, "Are they fact or fiction?" Are they fact or fiction? He says, "Yeah, the 7 grandmothers, 7 grandfathers, are they fact or fiction?" Yeah, it was like a gut punch. He would even ask me something like that. But I told him, I said, "Well, I don't know. When you, because he was a very spiritual man, and I respected that. When you sit down to read your Bible, and it tells you in there that somewhere in your history, you had a gentleman that went up a mountain somewhere. come up on a burning bush, and so he started talking to this burning bush, and he not only talked to that bush, it talked back to him. And then they told him to go farther up the mountain. He went farther up there and he found these stone tablets and come back down with them. These are our 10 commandments. You know, you obey these 10 commandments. And so I told him, I says, I did, you know, you want to fantasize our 21 original instructions and our 7 grandmothers, 7 grandfathers. So I don't know. You tell me, if you could tell me how to determine, you know, that your beliefs, your 10 commandments that you follow every day are they fact or fiction? You know, that's your spirituality. This is our spirituality. I don't understand the difference. Why do we have to, why are you asking me a question like that? I respect your spirituality. I said, but obviously you don't respect mine. I mean, or you wouldn't be asking me a question like that. But see, that's it. A lot of our people aren't healing because they're craving. That blood memory tells them that there's something else and they're not getting it. So that was the best way that I could explain it to them. I said, and when you put it like that, they finally could get it. I mean, but so we can teach you, we can share those things, and we can educate each other. When I talk about ignorance out there, I don't mean it disrespectfully. I just mean in the capacity that we haven't talked about these things before, and we haven't shared a lot of this stuff. So that's also a big part of what I do. So if we can have the next slide. Okay, so how do we fix this? You know, reclaiming our culture one ceremony at a time. And that's why I try to stress to everybody that comes in here. I not only give them the medicines that they need. I give them a smudge bowl. I give them, you know, the things that they need. I have a little bundle made up for them that they can take with them. But also empowering our people to know every time you pick those medicines up, you're in ceremony. And it only takes one person to do that, and that person can be you. So, picture of me and one of my aunties there too. Out we were actually out at our repatriation grounds and offering those medicines and leaving a small feast for our people out there. It's that time of the year when we do those things. But yeah, so if we could have the next slide, that'd be great, honey. Okay, and this one, when we talk about that medicine wheel, we see these colors all the time when we talk about our traditional ways. The teaching that I'll share with you one of our basic teachings. It's like, you know, when the creator put us here, he put the red man, the yellow man, the black man, and the white man, put us all here together to live together and help us maintain our Mother Earth, the Shkakamik way. Take care of her. And what this teaches us that if you mix all those colors together, they're going to give you the color of brown, which is our Mother Earth. That's how we're all interrelated and interconnected. Is we all have the same mother. We have our Mother Earth. You know, that's what makes us all brothers and sisters. So we use this medicine wheel is what we call it. And if you look around the edge of it there, when I talk about those 7 grandfather teachings, brave you, humility, honesty, wisdom, love, truth, respect, that's what we're talking about. And how those all interconnect, you know. We have a different medicine that associated with each of those colors on the medicine wheel that represent different directions. You know, obviously the east, that's that yellow. We see that's that first light that we see every morning. When I talked earlier about Vidasagad, that's what that is. It's that first light that we see. And those were a lot of our spiritual teachings come from. You know, I do my prayers at sunrise every morning. That's my time between me and the creator, me and creation. I said, so that's when I acknowledge who I am as an Anishinaabe woman, as a woman of the Wabanaki Odawa Nation, and put that out there with the creator, what it is I'm looking for today, or help me walk in a good way. Southern direction, that's all the eastern direction. For us, that represents some different stage of life. Benojik, that's those babies, that's the infant stage there. But when we go to the south, you get those warm winds from that south, the teaching, that feeling of that warmth, those emotions, the emotional side of us. That's the teachings that are associated with that. And that's, you'll see a lot of that represented the adolescent stage in our lives. You know, and then we move on to the west, which is Apengashmuk is how we say it in our language. But you know, for us, our teaching here is that when we spend our last time here, facing that western door, because that door will open, and when we take our final journey, that's where we go through, is through that western door. So that represents the physical being that we have here. Yes, so spiritual part of us, those beings will continue on, but the physical, the body part of us, it stays right here. So, and then we did the northern direction, a lot of it. We associate a lot of times, and we're coming up on it, that northern direction, that white, we have that blanket of snow that's coming, but for us, that represents the wisdom of our elders, that mind, that intellectual mind, that mental part of us that they help us keep in balance with, but it represents that white hair, the wisdom from our elders. So that's why we use that so much. We have that teaching how we're all interrelated, but it also represents so many other things. All right, next slide, please. Okay, there's my personal information, Delita Gaskell Smith. I work at our tribal health center here, which is a Minimuskiki Gummick. And what that means in our language is the Good Healing Lodge. This is that place where we are, take care of our people here. I'm a cultural resources coordinator, whatever that is. I'm still trying to figure it out. And I'm 3 years later and I haven't yet, but maybe I will. Anyway, I just want to say, Chimiwech, remember, we all have a common goal. We're all on the same team. It doesn't matter where we are. If you're in southern Michigan and, on the farthest end of the UP, we all want the same thing. And we're all on the same team. So, Miigwech, Manwi Iyang Mampi, thank you that we're all here together. And I always finish all my prayers, all my presentations, everything. And Danawid Manidok. And what that word means in our language is of all my relations everywhere, and we know that we're interconnected and we're all related because of the teachings of that medicine wheel. So I guess that's kind of about it. But if anybody has any questions or comments or anything, please. I like open dialogue. I don't like to just feel like I'm being lectured by somebody. So yeah, and there. Nothing is off limits. I'll just put it that way. But yeah, anything that you guys want to know. Well, like I said, if I know it stirs a lot of memories and stirs a lot of stuff that we don't talk about. So if questions come up later, please feel free to reach out to me. And I'm just so grateful that I had the opportunity to share a little bit with you guys. I hope it helps with your journey, your paths every day. But yeah, that's just kind of it in a nutshell for right now.
Delita, thank you so much on behalf of the Hope Cultural series, the training series. We're just so thankful for you. And I do know that Laura was monitoring the chat, and since it was taking all of my brain power to just advance the slides, I'm going to turn it over to Laura. And then there is a hand raising function. If you want to raise your hand, you can, but we also don't mind if you just unmute yourself and ask the question. We do have time, and just feel so honored to learn about your culture. And just thank you for being, was telling earlier with the team that you are like a human library. And I have a friend who was on this call. She went to one of those events, and you just have this gift of knowledge. And so thank you for that. I'm going to shut the call. Laura, if you can pull any questions that perhaps were in the chat. Otherwise, we'll start with Laura. If you don't have anything, you can turn it over to the audience. Thank you.
This is Stacy. Cynthia, I was monitoring the chat too. I did not see any questions, just some comments in the chat.
Okay.
So if somebody has a question for Delita, they're welcome to go ahead and ask it.
This is Mary Isaacson. Oh, I'm sorry. And I do have a question. First of all, thank you for that beautiful and presentation, because you brought it home, and to understand what does this trauma look like and how has it impacted us and continues to impact our relatives. So, I work with the Lakota population in South Dakota, and similar atrocities and everything. And I loved it. Was wonderful to hear what all my relations mean, or is what it sounds like in your language, because it's Mitako Oyasin in ours. Anyway, Laura is helping us. We have been asked to write a chapter on palliative care with Indigenous populations, which is very difficult because
Yeah,
how
it
do you
is.
do that? And
Right.
they wanted it international. So I'm working with somebody from Australia and then somebody from the Southwest, and then Laura is also helping. But a question I have is, so we know the trauma exists. We know that
Right.
when people with chronic illness or serious illness come in and they need um, and they're seeking help,
Mhm.
that our approach needs to be different. We need to
Right.
incorporate or to understand. Any thoughts or ways, trauma informed is not necessarily the right word either. I've heard violence informed because of the constant racism that still is present. Your thoughts, ideas as to how we as clinicians present ourselves and to also in a respectful manner.
Right. Well, a lot of people don't understand that during that final time, when we're in end of life, if you want to call it that, for a certain amount of days, our people believe that we're traveling between here and the spirit world. They're being reintroduced to where they came from. So I work with hospice and McLaren Hospice here, and they called me up and said, we have a gentleman here, and he's getting close to his end of life, and but we don't know, we have no idea where he's at. I mean, physically, he's doing okay. He's holding his own. However, he's been talking a lot of gibberish and we don't know what's going on. So I went over to see him and I said, what's going on? I call him my uncle. I call everybody either auntie or uncle. I don't have any aunties or uncles anymore. My grandmas are all gone. My grandpas are all gone. But I went in there and said, Uncle, what's going on? And I had a little bundle of medicines and put it in his hand. And he looked at it and he started talking to me in our language, because that's the language that they hear over there. And they know that they're headed there. And so when he starts saying things, and I looked at the nurse and I said, well, is that it? And she says, yeah, we don't understand what's going on. He's just talking gibberish. I said, no, he's talking in our language. That blood memory is telling him you're preparing to go back where you at. So that's when they really need those medicines. They really want those medicines, even though they haven't been raised in the culture. They don't know a lot of the teachings. They know that there's something going on that they need. And so, I'll sit and I'll hold their hands and pray for them in the language. I'll sing in that traveling song in our language, and just let them know, it's okay. We're going to be okay here. You've given us what you need. Your work is done. Just relax and enjoy it. It's a great journey, just that encouragement at the end of stuff, especially for those ones that they weren't raised with the culture. They don't have the teachings. They don't have those things. And I come from a family of 11 kids. I'm right in the middle of all that, but I'm the only one that walks that traditional road. It's not for everybody, but I really feel like, especially at the end of life like that, when someone is struggling and they know there's something more that they need before they leave here. So a lot of times too, I just put that little small bundle of medicines in their hand, and I call them, Shomas, so, Nokomas. I talk to them in our language a little bit and they settle right down. It's just like that part of them is acknowledging, yeah, I have this. And I'm okay with it. So a lot of times that's the approach that I take because I find that that's what worked best. Give them a little taste of something so they can leave all their extra baggage here, right? All those memories, that historical trauma, those memories that historical unresolved. Leave it here. Don't carry that baggage with you. Let us take care of it. Go ahead. It's good. They're waiting for you. So yeah,
Thank you.
that's how I do from a traditional, and then conversation goes from there.
Mhm.
So
Beautiful example. Thank you for sharing.
certainly.
Go ahead.
Hi, Cleo Colizaris. I'm with the Michigan Oncology Quality Consortium. And thank you very much for sharing your stories. You are very brave, and I respect you so much. Um,
Not
as
too much.
you're as you were talking, and many times I was crying.
Oh,
I was typing. I was typing up some notes, and I just wanted to share a few thoughts with you based
Okay.
on my culture. Um, I honor the struggles your people have endured. Forgiveness is a powerful medicine, but it is not the same as forgetting. Forgetting would erase the truth of your resilience and your people's resilience and the injustices you have all survived. The world may ask you to move on, yet I see remembering as sacred. It carries strength, wisdom, and healing for future generations. I cannot fully know your people's pain, but I honor it. As a Greek, I carry the memory of 400 years of Ottoman violent occupation of my people. And I understand how oppression leaves wounds that cannot simply be forgotten. Our histories are different, yet I feel a kinship in the resilience of our peoples. Forgiveness may open a path to healing, but memory keeps alive the truth that sustains us. So thank you for bringing that out in me. Thank you.
Right. No, thank you for listening. I mean, and this is how it starts, right? This is how the healing happens.
That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Mm. Anybody else? Feel free to unmute if you want. I'm going to copy Delita's contact information in the chat and drop it in the chat real quick. But if you don't get this, please reach out to me and I will be sure to share that with you all.
Mara, I see your hands up if you want to go ahead. Oh,
Mara,
I think
you're
you're
on mute.
muted.
Yep. What is currently happening in this space in terms of the kind of justice, accountability, retribution, like what is the current advocacy piece, if you could comment on it? And it probably varies from state to state, and
It does.
yeah. And as I
But you
mentioned,
know,
yeah, go ahead.
a big part of recognizing is recognizing or admitting the fact that something did happen, right? And that was why when I mentioned earlier, they prefer not to call it historical trauma, it's collective trauma. But I have been repeatedly reaching out to the diocese here, trying to get school records, trying to get those kind of things like that, and they still refuse to even admit that yeah, something happened, it might have been tough on people, but they refuse to, we can't get any access to the enrollment records and things like that. They could help us move forward. One of the big things, the reason I keep asking that, and I petitioned 5 different bishops for it now, a copy of the enrollment records from the school, because we still have kids that are buried over there. When they tore up and put in the new community center, when they redid the roads, they found bones, and they openly admitted they did. But from personal experience, I know that there's still more there. So they're not even acknowledging. It's really tough to when you can't get a seat at the table. Those kids that are buried there. When I refer to those, I used to stop over there all the time because they tore down the school. When they did that, they put a community center up there, but they saved the door frame. Those big heavy metal doors that we used to go through every day when we went to school there. They saved those. And I would walk up to those doors and I put our medicines down and I would offer a prayer for those kids that are still there, telling them, as long as I have a voice, you'll have a voice. But the reason I want to say their names. We have a ceremony. We can release their spirits and let them travel to that spirit world and be with their people waiting over there, right? Really, but it's hard to do those things when people don't acknowledge. And the last priest that I had contact with from Holy Childhood, I was out there one day putting our medicines down on the steps going up to those doors, right in front of those doors, and he come running over and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm just praying. Isn't that what, isn't that what you do here? This is the church." And he says, yeah, he said, but what are you doing? I said, well, I'm just offering those medicines and letting them know I'm still here and I'm not going anywhere until I know you're taken care of. But he said, you can't be here anymore. This is church property. You're not allowed here. So I've been banned from the property over there just for putting those medicines down and still offering prayers for the kids that are still there. So when you can't get that acknowledgement like that, it's really hard to move forward. But I still do it. I just stand on the sidewalk, right before we get to the church property. So there's ways we could still do those things, but it's hard. It's really hard to have reconciliation when you can, when you keep getting the door shut in your face. The Diocese of Gaylor's won't, I just asked many times to see the bishop over there so we can have a face-to-face conversation. And I've never managed that with any of the 5 that I petitioned. And then I get banned from the church property over there. The priest, so, you're not going to stop me. I mean, it's not going to. And my son, I have two sons. They're very well versed in what I do and the history from the school from when I was there, and they'll still have a voice after I'm gone. Who knows how long it's going to take, but I'm determined. And that's a big part of it too. It's just not. Just got to stay right in their face and let them know I'm not going away. My history here is longer than what yours is. But yeah, the longest running residential school in the United States of America was right here in our backyard. So anyway, yeah, did that answer your question, honey? Yeah. I know that Governor Whitmer has been trying to reach out, because there's so much attention now because um, the residential schools, it all started in Canada when they finding the mass graves up there, and she's trying to pave a path for us to get access to those things, and I know, like I said, when they redid the school or the roads over in Harbor Springs that go down to the church there, they had to call up the tribe because of NAGPRA. That's that Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. And so they had a great big pile of sand. They had our bones and stuff that the kids' remains in it. They called up the tribe and they gave us 48 hours to come and sift through that sand to take as much as we could. And after that, they just disposed of everything because they didn't want to talk about it or acknowledge it. There was never any public knowledge, and he released publicly saying that they found those, that they were still there. So we're still in that same space, but um, yeah, someone has an answer for that one. How to get them to engage more in a conversation. I'm happy to hear it but I'm persistent. I'm like one of those little gnats, that just keeps picking. So, yeah, I'm not going to stop. I can't. We have
Delina,
like this. Yeah.
you had you had a question on this part, and it's, have you asked the universities to help, or maybe the
You know what?
anthropology departments?
Right. We have a new girl as head of our tribal historic preservation officer. She is for our tribe, and she's reaching out to universities now. She's reaching out to those places that haven't been contacted before. So we're very hopeful. She's working hard. She's been with us less than a year, and she's accomplished a whole bunch of stuff already. But so we're very hopeful.
Mara, I love your suggestion, a high-powered human rights lawyer.
Yeah.
I am really hopeful that, the genius in this room that between all of us can come together. We've done a lot of learning, and now it's time for us and our organizations to really join alongside people like Delita, who are bringing voice to what needs to be heard. So thank you again. We are all virtually hugging you, Delita, for taking the time. So thank you so much. Please reach out if you have any questions for Delita.
It's just, I so appreciate the opportunity. So, and this is the way it's going to get done, just by sharing and the open dialogue. And so, like I said, if anything in the anybody in the future, please just reach out.
Thank you. You definitely deserve a seat at the table. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I'm up.
Miigwech.